Hello, everyone. Welcome to another amazing session with Sally Nye. She has presented for us before. She is a rock star librarian, has many ideas. So I'm super excited she's here with us today. She started her career in the northernmost school library in the United States. Among that, it was in Arctic of Alaska. Oh my gosh, so cool. So fast forward to today, she is the district librarian for the Burlington Area School District. She oversees 4 elementary schools. Her passions include maker spaces, sharing new technologies, and promoting the amazing diverse children's literature being creative. So her and I kind of have something in common because I also love children's literature. She's been a classroom teacher in North Carolina, a school librarian in Alaska and Wisconsin, and children's librarian for the Matheson Memorial Library. Sorry, say it for me, Sally.
Matheson.
Okay, perfect. So Sally, I'm so excited. You always, and I think I mess that up every single time I read your bio, but you are amazing. And I'm so excited that you're here with us. So you can go ahead and switch the slide. So this is a disclaimer that says an online degree from UAGC does not lead to immediate teacher licensure in any state. If you want to become a classroom teacher, you will have to contact your individual state to make sure that you have their qualifications. Next slide. This disclaimer just says that UAGC does warrant or constitute anything that is shared in this presentation today. So Sally, the floor is yours, and thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So you covered my bio, so that's great. I will mention that I was a preschool teacher for a couple of years, or for about 8 years too. I ran a preschool in my home. So I love story time. It's always my favorite time of the day. And as you can see, I am going to be talking about taking your story time to the next level. Just talking about some of the science behind why story time is important and some tools to help you get to that ultimate story time fun that we know that we can have. So just a few quotes to start us off with. Reading aloud is one of the most important things parents and teachers can do with children. Reading aloud builds many important foundational skills, introduces vocabulary, provides a model of fluent, expressive reading, and helps children recognize what reading for pleasure is all about. That was from Reading is Fundamental. I think a lot of times people see read alouds as just like a soft, fun part of the day. But the more I read and the more I research, the more I realize that read aloud is one of our core components of our day. And as I present today, I'm going to be presenting why that is the case. So just another quote for you. The read aloud allows teachers to model expert, fluent reading of the text. This liberates students from having to do the work of decoding and allows them to focus on comprehension, acquisition of new vocabulary, phonemic awareness, etc. And so as we are doing those read alouds, we are great models of literacy for our students. And I'm excited to talk about some of those things that are mentioned in this quote. One of my favorite places to go just to reassure myself what I'm doing is correct in literacy is Scholastic. They have the best websites with the best quotes. And so I just really thought about this. I really believe in a read aloud every day. And I know there's a lot of people picture book a day, a lot of people that really make sure they get that component. And what does that do if you are reading every day? It's creating lifelong readers. It teaches children to find adventure, ideas, and answers through books. It strengthens relationships and creates memories as a family activity, but I'll say as a classroom activity too. You're creating relationships within your classroom. It opened doors through which children can learn about themselves. And I'll be talking even more than doors where kids can travel. It builds a diverse vocabulary and strengthens fluency in reading. It allows a child's imagination and creativity to blossom. It gives children the tools needed to become successful readers and takes the scary out of reading in the classroom. How many students come in that just are not reading at grade level and are feeling really worried about coming to school? This takes the scary out of it. And I've seen even my kids that have the worst behaviors and just are so scared of trying to succeed in school. That's their favorite part of the day. And they'll tell me that every day. When are we going to read? When do we get to spend that time? because they get to escape. They get to see how fun literacy can be and how important it is. It helps children make connections to new places, people, and concepts. So building that background information, and it awakens children to the world around them. So if you have not checked out that Scholastic website, go there, and they have so many great infographics to help us out. Now, so the read aloud is just one of those most important places that we can get to that literacy in our classroom. So do we just jump in, pull out a book? Sometimes, but if we really are aiming to have some really high quality read alouds and some really classroom experience times together, there are several steps that we need to really think about as we're approaching that read aloud. The first of all, we're going to think about setting that stage. So how are you going to make kids aware of that story time and that you're transitioning and that it is a special time of the day? So we're going to set that stage for the story time. As you can see in that picture, that was for a reading night with parents. We had at a campfire, we had tents, we had lights to set the mood, and we sang songs around the campfire and really got into that camping theme. So as we pulled out the camping books, kids were really ready for that. You'll see my guitars around a lot. I am not a fantastic guitar player. I can play like my 3 chords to play Old MacDonald, but I will say that's just something. When I was student teaching, my cooperating teacher pulled out a guitar and I saw the kids lights just glow. I'm not saying everybody needs to play guitar, but if you have some type of talent or musicality, bring it out. Kids don't care how good you are. I'm out of tune half the time, but the kids love it and they clap along, and it really signals that that story time is beginning. Along with it, have some props and music, books displayed that go along with your theme of the day. Like I said, just let the kids get acquainted with that space and have time to transition and get ready for that time. When I was a preschool, or when I was the children's librarian in Elkhorn, I had little shaker bottles. You can see a picture of the shaker bottles right here with different fillings. And I would play a lot of kids songs as the kids would be coming in and they'd shake those bottles. And I transitioned that when I had my preschool as well. My preschool kids loved those bottles. And whenever I was going to do story time with them, they grabbed those bottles and we sang songs, and it signaled in their mind that that was going to be a story time approaching. A really funny story of this week. Now that I'm a librarian at a school district, I teach kindergarten to 5th grade. And the other day I was saying my goodbyes to 5th grade, and I was going to do my last read aloud, and they just weren't really in the mood, and they just weren't really part of it. And I hadn't brought my guitar because I thought 5th graders, they don't want to hear my Old MacDonald jingles. But the next day I did bring my guitar, and those kids were transported back to kindergarten, and we had the best story time. So just the difference, creating a culture, having a repetition is something that they expected. Those kids were so excited to be transported back into that story room, just like they had been in kindergarten. So, find your special thing. What makes you stand out to those kids? And then once you're in there, have your story starters. I always love to welcome, especially preschoolers, with their names. We say good morning to everybody in the group, and just really acknowledge each other and make sure that we are a group. Have fun rhymes. I had a puppet friend, Mortimer, right here. I'm going to say this. A lot of people feel uncomfortable talking as a puppet. They don't like making the noise. I don't either. So I have Mortimer talk to me. And you always put your puppet on your hand so it doesn't look like he's floating in the air. Put him on your hand so it looks like he's sitting on your hand. And he can tell you something in your ear and you can talk to him back. I always say my Mortimer's really shy, and so the kids really quiet down so they're not too loud for him. And he talks in my ear and I talk to him. And it's a really fun exchange, and the kids want to ask him questions. So I left a little mailbox and the kids could write little notes, and if they wanted certain books in the library. So it's just a great way to communicate with the kids and have that conversation with them. A person that I went to library school, her little trick was she had a little drawer and with little miniatures. And whenever she's doing a new theme, she pulled out the drawer, and the kids were always excited to see what her little miniature of the day was going to be, what exciting thing was going to come out. I've also had some colleagues do something called mystery bag. I tried it this year. It was really fun. I put 3 items in the bag that had to do with the story time. I was doing No David. So I put a water bottle and a marker and I don't know, something else that went with something naughty that he was doing. And I just laid them out, and the kids kind of talked about what they thought those items might be for as they looked at the book. And as we read, they were able to point as we got to the part where he's splashing water all over the place, like, oh, the water, like the water bottle. And we were able to transfer that to book care as well. And just talking about, oh yeah, don't get water on books, and no, David, no. And we were able to apply objects because kids love surprise bags and hidden objects and songs and friends. So all those things really bring them on board with that story time. You want to even up it a little bit more. I was lucky to get some Dash robots this year, and you can program in your voice. So I had a techie story time where we read Unplugged and how to code your robot. And I was able to do a knock knock joke with Dash. I was able to say knock knock and have him say who's there. And so we were able to do an exchange where you could record a couple phrases that he'd be able to say back and forth. And kids love robots. That was super exciting. When I was a public librarian, we had a magical summer theme, and I did some magic tricks. And I will tell you this, I am not a natural magician, but when I got it right, the kids were so excited, and we had the highest attendance of kids coming. They were so excited to see that. And I even had a day where my trick just bombed, didn't work at all. And then we were going to have a magician come. I said, well, that's why you need to come to the library to see a real trick that can work. So you can always play with things, or if you have a book that is going to work, you can always play with it, and it's okay to make mistakes. That was a really funny moment in our class that created even more of a culture. It actually made more of a culture than before. If you just are a jokester, love to tell knock knock jokes, kids love that, and all your joke books will be checked out if you're a librarian, or if you're in a class, so I'll grab those. And 5 senses. We are doing a gingerbread week, and I realized a lot of kids didn't ever have gingerbread before. So we smelled it and they got to taste it. Always make sure of food allergies, of course, if you're ever doing the tasting, but just using all your senses to become aware of what that story is going to be about. So that gets to that background knowledge that is so important. I just started reading a book called The Knowledge Gap, talking about our broken education system and how we're having really a knowledge crisis, where we're so focused on skills, we forget that kids need knowledge. And so a student's ability to comprehend a text will vary depending on his familiarity with the subject. No degree of skill will help if he lacks the knowledge to understand the content. As was mentioned, I did teach in the Arctic, and I love Jan Brett, and she at the time had a new book, The Umbrella, and I was so excited to share it with the kids, and I was reading it, and the kids just weren't connecting with the book. And I realized, like, do you guys know what an umbrella is? And they did not know what an umbrella was. So I realized it was very important for me to bring that umbrella in, open it up, show them what an umbrella is, and talk about when somebody would use it. And when they got that background, then they were able to understand that content of the book and relate to it and really have a more enjoyable story experience. So you really need to think about, what do my students know and how can they apply that to what we're reading? So there's actually a study done that was mentioned in the Knowledge Gap that they had both bad and good readers in a room, and they had a whole diorama of a baseball team. And so they had the kids read a passage and then put the players where they would have moved. And the bad readers who knew a lot about baseball outperformed the good readers who didn't. So it's just saying, you know, in our country, we really do have a knowledge gap of what kids do know. And unfortunately, those at a higher socioeconomic status are going to have more background knowledge. They've been introduced to more experiences and concepts. So just bringing that knowledge gap together is going to create some better reading experiences in your classroom. So along with that background knowledge, we do have vocabulary. Readers begin to find a text difficult to understand when a mere 2% of the vocabulary is unfamiliar. And here, going along with that socioeconomic, high income children hear 30 million more words than low income children by age 4. So once again, if they're not understanding the words that you're using or the concepts, they're not going to understand the literature that they're reading. And story time is the perfect time to introduce that vocabulary and discuss it and really open the awareness of a student's background knowledge. So as you're preparing, you need to really think about that vocabulary that is being used. And that goes into choosing the right book for that story time. So a lot of times if we have those younger readers, we do have active readers. And the first couple times we do story times, we really do need to capture their interest and get some really fun books. They're acquiring language skills quickly. They enjoy the sound of language, especially, I'll say, nonsensical words and a good laugh. And after all, they're developing a sense of humor. So they're really figuring out what is a joke, how does that language work? And I have Piggy and Elephant in the corner because those are the perfect books to introduce that humor and language, sound and dialogue, because kids just adhere to these characters and love using their voices. As you're also showing these books, you really need to think about the illustrations that you're depicting as well. Illustrations inspire a child's imagination, and in picture books, the illustrations really do contribute as much as the story shared. And yeah, I have featured Dan Santat here, who's one of my favorite illustrators. Kids really look for those big, bright pictures that really are displaying what's being talked about, and sometimes showing things that aren't said in the text. A lot of things that we use our visual literacy to pull from. As you can see, a lot of the pictures that we use really are big and bright. And these books actually encourage the reader to play with those illustrations. Press here, if you press the dot, it multiplies. Tap to play, we have to shake him and put him upside down to try to get to different platforms. Bunny slopes, you have to help the bunny get down the hill without falling in a hole. And Jan Thomas is another author, illustrator that's fantastic at creating those big, bright pictures and including that reader in her book. And like I mentioned, Mo Willems is just a genius at this too. A lot of people stick with a Piggy and Elephant, but if you branch out to Knuffle Bunny and the Pigeon and all of his fantastic, I think there's Squirrels Unlimited just added now, and just all those fantastic books. The kids really love those big bright colors and being included, such as don't let the pigeon drive the bus. The kids have to keep telling the pigeon, no, don't drive it. So they're really getting immersed in that story. But don't stick there. Don't stay just with those funny light ones, because once kids get more used to that story time, you're able to really expand what they listen to. Then you get to those genres that kids often avoid, such as poetry. Every year I pull out The Spider and the Fly for my younger readers, and it's really a complex, dark poem, but it talks about the fly and how she's going to be captured by the spider who's trying to really flatter her and lift her up. And she is a vain fly, so she does get captured. And in this eloquent language, the kids really study those pictures, and the vocabulary is so high, but the kids all understand what's going on, and they all are listening to that beautiful old English and depicting new ideas. Biographies, you can learn about so many people. We were talking about developing that background information. What better way to do that as you start to introduce famous historical people from our country and other countries past, really let kids get to know all those people that have made a difference in our world. Six Dots is about Louis Braille, and The Man Who Walked Between the Towers is about the towers before 9/11 and a man who actually tightroped across them. Nonfiction, there's so many beautiful narrative nonfiction books being created. Honeybee, my daughter and I sat down and read last year, and we were sobbing by the end. It takes you through the life cycle of a honeybee, and you really grow attached to this little bee who works so hard just to have his end of his life come at the end. And it was beautiful, and it really immersed us in that world of the honeybee. So a lot of these things really take our kids places that that they can learn so much more from. And I think of Ken Jennings, who said he just kept reading children's books to get his knowledge for Jeopardy. So we could do that for their students too, and they can get so much background knowledge. One thing I've really noticed is fairy tales and fables. Before, kindergartners and first graders, they would all know the Three Little Pigs or Jack and the Beanstalk, but those are just not as common anymore. And kids, half the class, have never heard that rich folklore before. So be sure to pull out those beautiful fairy tales. And some of them are a little bit longer, but I found that kids really do love them and want to be part of them. And you can do a lot of really great extensions with those tales. And so as you're doing that, if you're doing that read aloud, just think about what kind of skills you want to touch on as well. So maybe you want to focus on the alphabet or rhyming books or different sounds. Kids love those, and or else phonemic awareness. For each of these, I do have examples that you can click on and you can look at lists and lists. I think we've gotten to the point with the internet where if you just type in anything you're looking for, you're going to find a million great results. And I've noticed a lot of big public libraries are posting some really great stuff. So make sure you go to those sites first and really get some professional curated lists that are really going to help you out. Now, as we're reading too, I was talking about bringing in that background knowledge. That's where we really get to diverse books. So in 2020, they really took a look at who's being represented in children's picture books. And they found that 41% of the books were white children, 29% were animals, 12% were Black students, 9% Asian, 6% Latinx, and 3% had a disability. So obviously we're not, the students in your classroom aren't seeing themselves represented in a fair light. And so are you being mindful of who you're representing in your class? Are all your students seeing themselves? It says when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they are devalued in the society of which they are a part. Are you valuing all your students? So it says children need books that are mirrors that allow them to see themselves and their own experiences, windows that they can look through to see other worlds that they can then compare their own to, and sliding glass doors that allow them to enter other worlds. So are you allowing your students to see out windows to different ways of life? Are you allowing them to open that door and walk out into it and really experience those new situations? So really, don't underestimate kids. More and more in all the books I was reading having to do with read alouds and just literacy for children, it's that a lot of times we are underestimating our children. Don't underestimate them. The higher concepts we give them, the more they rise to the occasion. So I know a lot of times it's hard to know where to start with finding those really great books. I have recommended book lists over here. I will be sharing my slides at the end. I'll have a code if you will want that. And so I will give you access to my favorite list of great read alouds that I add to continually, and you'll be able to keep up with those. I will say Sam and Dave Dig a Hole here is one of the best picture books ever made. And I did hear some great ideas. I've tried it where I just read the words first and have the children try to guess what's going on in the story. And then we look at it with the pictures to see if it matched. And these kids keep digging and they just keep missing huge gems that are in the earth. And so they did not expect to see what they see in the pictures. So just once again, that using that visual literacy and how different that can make the text. And if we're talking about silly, nonsensical words, if you have not read the book with no pictures to your kids yet, you are missing out. One of the best books out there for that. So if you're just grabbing a book off the shelf and don't have a book list along, some things to think about. Open up that book. As you read it, can you picture the scenes in your mind's eye? For imagery, can you really picture what's going on? Do the word choices seem rich and varied? Thinking about that vocabulary, what vocabulary are you bringing to your kids? Are you interested in finding out what happens next as your curiosity sparked? And Lastly, don't use books that you don't like. Kids know that. If you're choosing your favorites that you really enjoy, you're going to have a better connection with your students and your class. I have right here Jim Chalice, who is kind of the father of the read aloud handbooks. And this book has been around for a long time, and a lot of people really adhere to it. He has some really, really great suggestions for read aloud books in there too. He has chapter books, picture books, everything. All right, before you actually get in front of those kids, first you need to practice. Here you can see some of my older kids, they're practicing before reading to some kindergartners. So to do, grab your Post-it notes and think about what prior knowledge will students need. So is this book really different than where you live? Are there different concepts? Like I said, in the Arctic, they don't have umbrellas. So that was something I should have sat down and thought about. So what's going to really catch your students? I once was doing a slavery topic with second graders and got halfway through before I realized they didn't understand what slavery was. They hadn't really touched upon that. So what knowledge will they know for that? Plan some questions that will help spark that interest and understanding. Do think alouds. I hear there's segregation. I wonder what that is. I wonder if the next page will talk about that. So you can demonstrate the thinking process to your students so they can model that as well. And then think about what vocabulary words in there are going to be difficult for your students to understand. Now, sometimes they're like when I was talking about the spider and the fly, it's very high vocabulary through the whole thing. During your reading, you should not stop for each of those words and describe it and explain it. In a book like that, I just want them to hear the whole language and hear the flow of the story and come to conclusions and see if they can understand it. Just hear that language. In fact, I never recommend stopping as you're reading because it does stop that flow, and that's not natural reading. So that's why we're thinking beforehand, what things are they going to have to know as they go into that story? So also get your playfulness on. A willingness to relax and be playful is usually all it takes. Show characters' emotions with your facial expressions. Use a gruff voice for a grouchy lion or squeaky voice for a little mouse. Try reading different parts faster or slower and vary the volume of your voice too. I started off a music major, and so this was a natural transition for me. I was able to think of dynamics, forte and the piano, the soft and loud. And I thought of like using high voices and low voices and changing your voice all around. So I highly recommend find a friend who likes to listen to books with you and just practice for them. My husband was my test subject all through the beginning of my storytelling, and he'd help me out with making voices. And if you do come up with a special voice for different characters and it feels right, it's really fun to take that to your students, and they really appreciate that voice too, and it helps you stay in character for that book. So I do highly recommend just getting that playfulness and practice. So number 4, just remember that this is not a performance. It is an interactive story time. So it's a time where you can bring up that book and then do some interactive, have some interactive opportunities based off of that. So I was just reading about a whole book approach that is really important, and I really used during my Caldecott unit this year. The Caldecott Award is given to pictures books every year that have just amazing illustrations. And every year I take my favorite books of the year and have kids look at them and vote on which one they think will win the Caldecott Award. And so we really take time to look at that cover and really have the kids try to decide what's going to be happening in this book. If it's a tall book, why did the illustrator choose to make it tall? If it's a wide book, why did the illustrator make it wide? There's a really great one this year. I'd recommend Mel Fell, which is a fabulous new picture book. And this book, you open, so there's the pages top to bottom, not left to right. And I asked the kids, why do you think the illustrator did this? And in it, a bird is falling. So it really allowed us to look at that action of falling, and the kids could really think about that before I dove into the book. Have the kids really look at the pictures, take a picture walk through the book before you read it. Unless there's surprises in the book, you don't want to give those away, but have them predict what might we be seeing as we read this book today, and really think about why the pictures were made the way they were. If they're using muted colors, why the illustrator use muted colors? If you're using bright colors, why did they use bright ones? There was The Dark by Lemony Snicket, where he goes down into the basement to find the dark. It's all dark and black. And so we talked about why this book used that and why it was a little scary. Also look at the typography. If we're looking at a page like, oops, if we're looking at a page like this in the book with no pictures, we know that we are going to have to put some emphasis on saying some of those things, such as badungi face. We know that we're going to want to use some silly expression. So my kids can help out with that. Another book I've really been appreciative of is Disruptive Thinking. So how we read matters. And so there is a whole way that students can respond after the read aloud using this method. So first of all, we think about in the book. So what was the story about? Who was telling the story? What does the author want me to know in that book? And then go to your head. So what surprised me? What does the author think I already knew? Was I challenged by my thinking during this book? Or was I challenged during this book? Or did it confirm what I think? And what did I notice that really stood out? And then go to your heart. How did I learn more about myself? And how will this help me be better in life? So I just think of, To the Market. I can't think of the name of the book, but there's a boy that travels with his grandma every Saturday to go serve at the soup kitchen. And so it really made me, I said, the book was about this boy who didn't want to help his grandma. And the author wanted us to know that that was something he wasn't very appreciative of in the beginning, but surprised me that he saw so many beautiful things along the way. And it learned that maybe I need to do more service in my daily life to see more of the beautiful things. So it really helps us pull that meaning out of that story and really think about the process. Some more fun things that can be done throughout that story time. I just found a fun app called Novel Effect, and it actually plays background music and sound effects as you are reading. This year I did do Blueberries for Sale, where she's dropping her little blueberries in her pail. There's actually a little clink, clink from the sound effects as you're reading. And there's beautiful music that's playing as she's traveling up the hill. Dasher actually gave me a round of applause from every second grade I read it to this year. They had the jingle bells and she sneaks out of a gate that creaks open. So having sound effects was really a fun additional touch to have. There is a paid cost for that, but I think there are some trials throughout the year where you can use it for free. I think in December is when it was free. And that was a great time with a lot of their Christmas books. I know some teachers use The Grinch Before Christmas, or The Grinch Who Stole Christmas too. And so that was really fun. Now, once you're done with that story too, I was reading more and more about something called like TV syndrome, where kids are used to just flipping channels. And you just think of when they're online, just flipping ideas. All of us in this community, this society, are just so used to flipping. So, just really stay on a subject. In fact, when I ran a preschool, I made sure I just stayed with that theme all day so the kids could really sit in it and think about it and do experiences having to do with that same subject background and vocabulary. And so is there reader theater that they can do, flannel board retellings, puppet retellings, and STEM extensions is something really fun that I just added this year. So this one you can see here, Naya's Long Walk. I was able to take this class where we talked about how these girls had to walk for miles and got sick from the water that was just standing water, and how a man brought wells to their community. And then we were able to do a STEM project talking about how wells would work. And so just talking about gravity and force and a lot of those scientific words that would go along with that. And so it's a really fun experiment that the kids really enjoyed and really tied into that literature, just making a whole book experience. So overall, with that read aloud, you are creating classroom culture. You're creating empathy in your students, experiences together, higher vocabulary, a love of language. Then all of these can continue to grow long after kids can read by themselves. I really urge you to find books that tackle tough topics and lead the discussion to help them cope. A beautiful new book is called The Breaking News. So many adults lately are just, every time we look at the news, we get more stressed, and kids can tell stress a second after we get it. So this was a fantastic book just showing how kids want to help and don't know how, and they're worried for their parents looking at this breaking news. It never gets into the politics of it or the bad events, but it just shows, sometimes your parents are worried, and maybe you can like pick up your room a little and help out. Maybe you can help your brother or sister. And just if you're doing little things, the parents were very appreciative of that extra behavior, but also that it wasn't the kid's fault. Like we just all work together to create a good family life. So very good. I loved Breaking News. Awesome. Also, an important thing, help your class find characters they can relate to and learn from. I love Jabari jumps. He has to gain the courage to climb that ladder. He stands there and he has to decide if he's going to go off the high diving board or not. And so why not use that character later on? So if you have to do something kind of tricky in your class, what would Jabari do? How would he get the courage to do this? And so really bring in your characters throughout the day. If Pete the cat was here and he couldn't tie shoes, what would he do? And just thinking about how we do have these role models we've read about, let's tie them back in. And also use picture books that build knowledge and support connections to the complexities of the world around you. Just give them as much background knowledge as you can. Close that knowledge gap so all of our students can be reading together. So if you're looking for some story time ideas for some finger plays and songs and rhymes and books, these were some really fantastic places I saw. If you go to the Madison Public Library, they have so many themes and so many ideas. And my Storytime Corner, just go to Pinterest and there's a billion ideas. And on the Port Washington Public Library also had some really great resources there. So if you're looking for how to combine different aspects, I would definitely go to those places. And as you're moving along, some of you are going to be working with even older students or staying with the younger, really think about what is the personality of your readers in your classroom. What kind of genres do they like? This year I created a reader personality test that was really fun, and the kids got to sit down and really think about what type of reader they were. So they answered questions such as, like, would you rather be like on a scavenger hunt fighting dragons? You read because you want to escape the real world. It's raining outside. There's nothing else to do. You pick a career. Would you want to be an astronaut or songwriter? So they went through and really answered questions about themselves. And then once they did that, move that like this. Once they did that, then they found out what their personality was. And I was able to have some brochures of book ideas. So the questioner, if they like to question everything and learn about the world that way, they could go in, and I had series books, picture books, a description of what they were and what their pet peeves would be, and all kinds of fun things like that. So, and then I had different genres that they'd most likely like to read from. And so if you are interested in helping find the voice for your students, I do have that you can click on and you can look at those. I'm not going to share the actual quiz because I saw that on Pinterest. It belonged to somebody else, but the pamphlets I did make up of my own. So these were some of the questions that I did have in the quiz if you wanted to do something like that for each of the reading personalities. So I covered a lot of different things, just mostly thinking about building that background knowledge of students and including them within your story time. If you're interested in other resources to use within your classrooms, I did attach some other digital resources that I've recommended in the past that you might want to look at. So, and some really great things that you can use. So with that, I'm looking for my last slide just to show you that I do have a code right here, tinyurl.com/BDYY4DKE. And if you type that in, you'll be able to find these slides and all the resources that are in them. And it looks like, since we do have a little bit of time, I just looked at the time, we can go back and I'll show you some of these resources that I would recommend in here. So if we go back, so like I said, there is a great read aloud right here. If you click on that, you can see that there are some of my favorites in here, and it will have the author and the title. Bark George is hilarious. It's about a dog who has swallowed other animals. And so instead of making a barking noise, he's saying other animals' noises. And they go to the vet, and the vet has to pull all those animals out of him. And his mom especially loses control when the cow is pulled out of him. And so do the kids. So if you're really looking to cover animal sounds, that's a fantastic book. Dad and the Dinosaur is this kid who's a little worried about doing different things in his life. And he has this dinosaur that gives him courage. And he feels like he's a dinosaur. And one night he loses that dinosaur and he goes to his dad. He doesn't want mom to know. And they go quietly to go find it in a field. And I'm just talking about his dad saying it's okay to be scared and it's okay to find ways to make yourself feel braver. I did mention the dark today and how a boy is sitting and one day the dark calls, Laszlo. You have to give that real grovelly voice and helps him pull up the stairs. Anything by Drew Daywalt is very awesome to look at. Another new author I'm really appreciating is Lay. And this was drawn together about a grandpa and a boy who speak different languages and they have to find a way to communicate, and they find that drawing brings them together and they really enjoy that time together. At first, they're not sure they're going to like it, but then they pull together. Dream Girl, about how a girl is told she can't be a drummer, but she follows her passion and her dreams. Anything by David Shannon, Duck on a Bike, if once again going with that animal theme and letting people ride around the barnyard. And what's really fun is they do have some of our 80s shows knockoffs. So we have the X-Files, and this is a really fun one. If you're doing a camping theme, these kids are camping and they are seeing some really odd things, and the ending always gets the kids. They're really shocked by what they find, so I won't give it away. Kevin Hankis has beautiful books, Kitten's First Full Moon, and this one, Egg. This one also has a surprising ending. This egg won't hatch, and they're all wondering what's going to happen. And so these birds try to help it out. It's always fun to see other things animated as well, such as Exclamation Point by Amy Rosenthal. Yes, Exclamation Point doesn't quite fit in, so just trying to find the place and just the journey of Exclamation Point. Mo Willems, one of the ones people might not know as much about is Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs, which is hilarious. But make sure if you are using this that your kids do know that basic story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears and that they can apply this one. The Grumpy Pets. This is about a boy who just is grumpy about everything, and all these pets are too happy looking. So he wants to find his very own pet. I Want My Hat Back is one of my darkest reads on here. Someone has stolen Bear's hat and he is going to find out. And the ending, kids don't quite get it at first. It's really fun to think as a class, like what's happening and let their thoughts come out on what they're processing. Interrupting Chicken might be your students. Little Red Chicken wants Papa to read, and whenever Papa's reading, she interrupts and changes the story. So this is a great one. If you have a lot of interrupting chickens in your classroom, it's a really perfect story to use. Anything by Todd Parr is excellent to use. He does so many great conceptual books. There's some on like loving the earth and it's okay to be different and different families. And these books are just beautiful and those big, bright pictures kids really relate to. I did mention Jabari Jumps today. He's one of my favorite books ever made. And Kim's First Woman. Here it is, Last Stop on Market Street, the book I couldn't remember the name of earlier, about the boy who travels to the soup kitchen with his grandma. It's a beautiful book. Sometimes it's fun to see authors combine together. So we have Brown from the Arthur books and R.L. Stein that combined to make a picture book. And so this is a really fun one, especially around October, The Little Shop of Monsters. And so, yeah, and just making sure you're using those diverse books, the Lucia, the Lucadora, and just using different cultures. The Man Who Walked Between the Towers, as I mentioned earlier. Anything by Ryan Higgins is also awesome, such as We Don't Eat Our Classmates, where this dinosaur goes to school and eats his classmate and is told he cannot do that. Mother Bruce is also amazing. This bear has some goslings that hatch and they think he's a mother. He's just this grumpy old bear, but he puts on that mother hat pretty well. One of my favorites from a long time ago, Kaiko Kaza, it has My Lucky Day. That's where yes, you just have to read it. There's lots of surprises. If you're looking for just a quiet book that kids really get immersed into, The Night Gardener is beautiful. At night, there's a man that goes out into the neighborhood and he keeps sculpting trees into just beautiful different shapes. And a boy is just enamored by this and wants to follow in his footsteps. And just the beauty of the pictures, kids really get thrown into that. Nico draws a feeling. So just talking about that social emotional. And of course, any narwhal unicorn book's always going to be a hit. Old Mama Squirrel has the most fantastic mama squirrel who's going to defend her babies, even against a grizzly bear. And if you're looking for figuring out a voice to use, this is a great one to use. And once again, building that background knowledge, this is a beautiful picture book on Albert Einstein. So I know kids love learning about different historical figures. Then we get to the silly, one big pair of underwear. The other side is really talking about segregation in a way that kids can really understand. I read this with first grade and the kids are captivated by this story. So there's a black girl on one side, a white girl on the other, and there's a fence in the middle that they like to sit on and be together. And so just wondering if that fence will ever be removed. Beautiful book. Pass It On is just talking about passing on that kindness. And Perfect Day has one of my favorite pictures ever, how it is a perfect day for a bird and a squirrel until bear comes, then it is his perfect day. Beautiful, it's really funny. If you're ever looking for great illustrations, Lane Smith has some really great ones. So Renato and the Lion, it talks about war in Europe. So just bringing those big concepts. Sam and Dave Dig a Hole that I mentioned. Silly Doggy is a great one. This girl brings home this dog that just won't do what he's supposed to do. And she never quite puts it together that it's a bear. Sparky is a pet that doesn't do quite much. And there's that Spider and the Fly with its big eloquent language. Tacky the Penguin is one of my favorite characters ever and a great place to start when you're working on vocalization and trying to come up with character voices. You can screech the craziest you want to with him and kids love it. More squirrels, Kevin Hankey's again, waiting, where some toys really are waiting for different things and having different experiences. We Forgot Brock is one of my favorites. It's about this imaginary friend that a boy goes to the fair and leaves behind. And his imaginary friend meets another girl's imaginary friend and they become friends. So it's a really fantastical, fun tale of imaginary friends. I love the parents' looks through it. Some of these book illustrations are for adults too, just to find the humor in it because these parents just don't know what's going on with their son when Brock's gone. One of my favorite classics, Where the Wild Things Are, kids time after time will just sit spellbound for this one. If you really make the mood, get the kids ready for it, immerse them in it, that is a fantastic one. Who says women can't be doctors? So learning about women that broke those ceilings and made it through. Woodpecker Wants a Waffle is a terrific one about this restaurant that the waffles smell so good. The woodpecker wants to get in. So he tries to devise a plan that will let him get into that restaurant and eat that waffle. And what he comes up with is pretty elaborate and amazing. I just did After the Fall this week with 5th grade, and it talks about Humpty Dumpty and how after he falls, he's afraid to continue going on. But one day his paper airplane lands on the wall and he has to decide if he's going to climb it again or not. And is he going to gain his courage or not? And the ending is very surprising, even for 5th graders. So those are some great read aloud options that you might be interested in. Underneath that, I do have some toddler read alouds, such as, and you're going to see as you get down to that baby story times and toddler story times, we especially then get those more simple illustrations. There's a lot of pop-up books that kids really get into. The Whose Baby Am I series are always fantastic. And we were talking about bringing up that curiosity that what will hatch is fantastic as well. So you have to guess what's going to be in each of the eggs. And children love when they get to be part of guessing games at a story time. The Seals on the Bus. Anytime you can sing along and make that music with kids is going to be even better. So I did find there's a whole Pinterest list of singable books for kids. And so, like I said, it doesn't matter if you are tone deaf, if you can sing at all, kids don't care. As long as they can sing with you, that they love it. I Went Walking is fantastic. I'm the Biggest Thing in the Ocean is a really funny squid who tries to just show that he's the greatest artist, he's the biggest thing, and just tries to prove his worth in the books. They're really funny. No David by David Shannon, of course. And once again, Jan Thomas. Just trying to think of any standouts here. The Dinosaur versus Bedtime is really fun. If you let the kids all practice their roars before the story time, then they can join in whenever he is versus something else. I always do Dinosaur versus the Library, and they have Dinosaur versus Mama. There's a whole series of those. Yeah, so as you can see, there's a lot of really great choices here. See if there's any other standouts. They're all good, but yeah. And we'll go back and see some other of the resources. Let's see. Oh, I think maybe I'll go back to this and you can see some more of those reader personalities. So let's see. So we have the questioners. When you pull up the brochures, you can see that questioners are curious and like to know how and why things happen. They like logic. They like not knowing what's going on, being told you ask too many questions, being told to mind their own business. And so it tells which genres for questioners. Some of my favorite picture books on there is I Want My Hat Back, which is the one I mentioned about the bear. Miss Nelson is Missing, and that's a fun one to dress up for if you are going to go for it. I'm going to mention right here, I did put a wordless picture book on here Tuesday. Don't be afraid to use wordless picture books. Kids love to tell the stories with them. It really immerses them in it. And David Weisner is just a genius when it comes to those. Becker's Journey is another one where a girl draws a door with a red crayon and enters this fantastical world that the kids just love. So some fantastic ways to bring that questioning to your story time. Some other ones, so maybe you have escapists that love fantasy. I know there's more parents playing D&D now and more kids part of those cultures. So we see those monsters, such as Where the Wild Things Are. There's a really great one. Nobody Likes a Goblin telling a story how he's always the bad guy. But in the end, maybe the heroes weren't quite the heroes that they needed to be. So we do have that Little Shop of Monsters I showed earlier, and some really great read aloud options too. Sometimes those chapter books are fantastic for reading with your class too, like The Monster's Ring, about a boy who puts on a ring and turns into a monster, is something that's the kids can really see. Princess in Black is a fantastic one too, that kids really see. This girl who's a princess wants to be an adventurer sometimes as well, so she breaks out of that princess role. And so we have Innovators. You can go to that brochure. And we can see that there's different science ones and building. So how to code a sandcastle. If your kids are interested in computer programming, it really brings it down to the basics. A favorite of kids is If I Built a Car. So just thinking about different design methods, and they have If I Built a School, and different things like that as well. And The Realist. These are those kids that like real stories. So we see a couple that were mentioned before, Dream Girl. Dear Mr. Washington is fantastic, about Washington, President Washington, when he was getting his portrait taken, and the artist's children are about as naughty as kids can be, and he tries to help them get better manners. Fantastic book. So we see that there's a lot of historical figures in there and a lot of great read alouds. So that's what you're going to find. If you do click on some of those pamphlets, you'll see some descriptions of what the readers are. You'll find some chapter books and some picture books, and hopefully that will help out with some of your storytime endeavors as well. So once again, I will take us back to here. If you are interested in getting this URL, that'd be fantastic. And I think that I'm all done. So I hope that you all got something out of this presentation today. And I thank you for joining me. And if you ever have any questions or concerns, my email is right on here too. I love helping people create book lists, and I help people find the literature that they're looking for. So happy reading, and I hope you have a great rest of the conference.
Sally, what amazing information. I told you she always gives the best resources and the best ideas. So thank you again for doing that, like you always do. We appreciate you so much. Your presentations and your sessions are always full of information. So thank you for taking time out of your busy day and being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.